I'm Matthew Kurbis, the subscription attorney, and this is Law Subscribed, your dedicated source for all things subscriptions and the law. Thank you to my sponsors. See links to them in the show notes. Everything discussed is only for educational and entertainment purposes. Enjoy the show. Let me go ahead and welcome everybody to a special episode of Law Subscribed Live. I'm Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I have a rare second-time guest on the podcast, Mark Stiving. Welcome back to Law Subscribed.
Hey, thank you, Matthew. It's going to be fun, I hope. Well, we'll see, I guess.
We'll see. So just to bring folks a little bit up to speed here, I had Mark on the podcast years ago now, episode 56 of Law Subscribed. Definitely a great companion episode to this, whether you're watching this live, cue that up to listen to next, or if you're watching this, or if you're watching or listening to this at some point after we've recorded this live, then go ahead and listen to episode 56 after that, because that goes into more of Mark's background, his expertise, his advice on, attorneys who want to ditch the billable hour and how to think about value and good, better, best pricing and all that good stuff. I heard about Mark from Robbie Kelman Baxter, who was also a guest on my podcast. Mark was on her podcast, Subscription Stories. And I hadn't actually consumed any of Mark's content at the time that Mark came on my show. I just heard him guest on another podcast. Well, since then, I've been listening to the Impact Pricing podcast and reading Mark's blog posts for over a year now. Have had some incredible eureka moments thanks to Mark and the content he puts out there. Most recently, Mark has published a book, Instant Profits. And so we're going to be talking about instant profits today and some other interesting things Mark's been talking about recently on his podcast. And we're going to be talking about AI. Having said all that, Mark, any other stuff you want to fill in your background before we dive right in?
I just want to say thank you. And can you do introductions for me all the time? I really appreciate that.
I'll give you the recording of this and you feel free to clip it and use that whenever you want.
There we go.
And AI is there's two different AIs taking notes on this automatically. So, you'll have the transcript at least that you could use. You could quote me on your website or something.
Perfect.
And I'm saying that live, so you know that you have my consent to do so. So let's get into it. The new book, Instant Profits: How to Raise Prices Without Losing Customers. I have it. I got 3 copies because I wanted one for myself, and I plan to gift 2 to customers that I think would benefit from having this book. The title says it all, Mark. But what's the book about? What's the point behind the book, and why did you price it the way you priced it?
Okay, so let's start with the quick story. I sat down to write a book for executives, and I had the hardest time. I write books because I love sharing my ideas and my thoughts, and I just couldn't get my arms around what does an executive really need, and I know so much about so many different things. And then one day I just said to myself, I was on an airplane, by the way, just launched, took off, and I said, why don't I stop trying to write this all in one, here's what executives need to know about pricing book. And what they really want to know and need to know is how they go raise prices. Because every company needs to go raise prices. Every company's afraid to raise prices. And so let's just do that. And believe it or not, in 2 flights, I wrote this entire book.
Right? Well, I believe it because I read it just in one morning, Mark.
Now it makes it sound chintzy and cheap. But in truth, it's not. I've edited it several times. It's got great content. You can decide if it has great content or not. But in my mind, I thought, there's no anecdotes. There's no fluff. I don't repeat the same point 7 times, right? It's like, here's what you need to know. Go do this. And if you can't read this book in 35 minutes, then you're a really slow reader. I can say that.
Yeah. I recommended this to somebody who might actually be a future guest on the Law Subscribe podcast, an attorney of a really successful firm that wants to go all in on subscription-based pricing. And when I told him about exactly what you just said, because I hadn't read the book yet, but I heard you describe it in the same way, he goes, "That's what I need." And he gave me some Yiddish word. I forget what it was, but it means just get to the meat, get to the actual good stuff. Don't give me any fluff. This is what I need to know to change. And I could say that there is no fluff in this book. I think it's all quality. And it's not going to sink in right away for people who have a certain legacy mindset with pricing and with value. So the fact that you can read it multiple times, every night before you go to bed or in the morning when you wake up, it will let it sink in a little bit more.
Yeah. And the way I like to think of it, at least the way I thought of it as I read it or before we published it, was I want you to read a sentence or a paragraph and then just stop and think about it, right? How are you going to use this concept, or can you use this concept, and is it going to apply? And I can pretty much guarantee you that there's a concept in this book that will make you money, and it pays for its $100, right? So we charge $100 for it, and we did that mostly because I wanted people to know this is here to make you money, and you will make way more than $100 when you buy this book.
And your market's really important, right? Because the market that you wrote this book for, you mentioned executives, and I have to imagine too that that's who you're consulting with. And often the question you'd get is, I just want to make more money, Mark. Tell us how to make instant profits. Like, is that kind of like in your actual work when inspired writing the book like this?
Yeah, so rarely do people say, I just want to make more money. What they often say is, we need to raise prices.
Okay.
I can't get my team to raise prices. We're afraid to raise prices. My salespeople won't raise prices, right? And so there's this huge fear of what happens when we raise prices. And in fact, I think that was the first chapter of the book is that, why are you afraid to raise prices? And how do we get over that fear? What's going to happen?
The preamble, maybe even. But
Yeah.
oh yeah, alleviating fear, right? Was chapter one, and the chapters are just a few pages, folks. So don't be discouraged. But for these executives, I mean, $100, even if they just increase their prices by 1% across the board, they're making thousands, if not tens of thousands more dollars. Like the return on investment is almost immediate.
That's exactly right. But let's talk about psychology for a second, right? So
Sure.
what if I charged $1,000 for the book, right? I mean, that's really hard to fathom. $100 is what, 4 times the price of an average book, right? If you're going to go buy a book. And so it's already priced at some ridiculously high price. In fact, I think I wrote this in the beginning of the book that you pay 50 times more per word for this book than you do for any of my other books, right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty dang funny. But you don't buy books for the words. You buy books for what it does for you and what it teaches you. And so that was just my positioning on this book.
Yeah, there's but I think when you spend that much money on a book where you normally would not spend that much unless it's like a course book for like, college or law school or something, right? You're going to want to get a return on investment right away. Uh, Other friend of the show, Ray Lambert, founder of a new in-person event platform called River. They're starting to launch paid events because one of the things about when you pay to go to an event, you're actually going to show up rather than just register for an event for free. Like, I don't need to go. It's not costing me anything, right? Even if you go, you can meet somebody, you can meet a potential client, you can meet a potential partner. There could be great value, but if you're not paying something, you're maybe not going to go. Well, if you only pay, $5 for a book, are you even going to read the thing or listen to the thing? Maybe not. But $100, you bet you are.
Yeah. And the good news is, like I said, it takes you 35 minutes to read it. So there's no reason not to read it. And then after you've read it the first time, it's easy to go back and say, okay, what was that? Let's go read that again. Because it really is just filled with meat.
Yeah, and it's deep. I'll say that even though I read it all this morning, I reread some of the chapters immediately, or like just some of the paragraphs immediately, because like it does take a second to sink in. This is not like popcorn quick. This is deep quick. And so that's something I just want to point out to the listeners, watchers. What is a podcast these days, Mark? It's all.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. So you've been having Stephen Forth on your podcast a lot lately, and you've been talking a lot about AI. You talk about this idea, that Stephen Forth's idea, but you extrapolate on a lot, and that is service as software. And I liken this to like what I'm trying to do with Law Subscribed and encourage lawyers to ditch the billable hour for subscription, like how most softwares are billed. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about service as a software, why it matters, the implications of AI in this space. And while I normally contextualize it in the legal space, you don't have to do that. Like just give my listeners a high level overview of all that.
Yeah. So let me do that. But I actually love a 4-quadrant chart that Stephen put together. I mean, maybe he stole it somewhere. I don't know, but I'm going to give him all the credit for it. Right. And you think about this as, is it making decisions? Is it autonomous? And what was the other? Oh, is it solving a specific problem? I think is the other one. But in one quadrant, you've got the generators, right? We've got Chat GPT. So the funny thing about Chat GPT is it's a platform. You can do anything with it. And so it's really hard to price it around value because it's just a platform. And then as we move to the To the lower right, you've got copilots. And so Grammarly is a great example of a copilot. I use Grammarly all the time when I write something and it tells me, hey, Mark, you're stupid. Don't write it that way. Write it this way. And I mess up commas all the time. So Grammarly's sitting there helping me out the whole time. And then as we start to move more towards automation, we've got something called agents. When you think of agents, these are things that can actually make decisions and do something. So you could almost think about the chat bot in the corner of a lot of help places. Hey, can I help you do this? Now, Steven's definition of an agent is it's not really an agent until it solves a problem.
Mm-hmm.
If it can say, hey, I opened a ticket and I closed a ticket, then yeah, it's an agent. It solved the problem.
So these AI note takers aren't actually agents because they're not actually doing anything. They're just taking notes. But if they say, assign you tasks to your calendar based on the meeting without you having to interface or do anything, now we're in that agent category.
Yeah. So I think that's how he would define it, how he would think about that. Yes.
Yeah.
And as it is today, we'd probably put it more in the copilot range
Mhm.
that says, hey, look, it's doing the stuff along with us. And we get to go use that information to make better decisions on our own.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to the AI agent space, Mark, because what it could do for me, what I could do is instead of just having some basic automations that already exist, right? Client, I have an intake form for a particular service I provide. Client fills out the information. It creates the documents, the legal documents, whatever. The documents are prepared. Then the human task is talk to the client about it, go through it, customize it a little bit based on, their particular needs. Like that's already great. But what I would love to do is like, I don't even need to interface with the client up to a certain point. They just decide they want an asset purchase agreement or a master services agreement or a simple estate plan or whatever the practice area. And they check out in a cart, they buy that thing. The AI agent, asks them questions in a chat-based or even virtual, the voice is getting so good now. And I don't want to pretend that it's me or pretend that it's some human. No, this is like the AI agent assistant. So we could start your thing you bought right now. Like, we're not going to waste any time. They're going to do that work. And then it's going to schedule time on my calendar for me to review it and put human eyes on it, right? Just to confirm all that stuff. So like, that's where I see this going. And I think you could charge more for that because that's higher touch, quicker turnaround than what I have going on right now. What do you think about that?
I think that's spot on. Right. So the whole point of the agent is it can do the work and it knows the answer mostly, right? I mean, you still want to double check it, especially if it's going to be, a legal thing. But what do you do after it's been right 100 times in a row? You're like, it's right. We know that it's going to be right. And by the way, I'm not right 100 times in a row.
Right.
So we got to be happy with that. And then the last piece in Steven's 4 quadrants is the one that he calls service as software.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've all heard of software as a service. And so that's all of the subscription software that we subscribe to. But when we think of service as software, what he's really saying is, can we take an entire function and replace that entire function with AI? And so the conversation I had with him actually had to do with legal, right? As I said, hey, is legal Zoom this? And he says it's not, because it isn't making the decisions, it isn't doing everything, but it's moving closely in that direction. Right. And so how do you say, look, you need legal help? Come talk to me. I'll do the intake. I'll figure out what you need. I'll, come up with a solution for you on the other end. And so can we actually replace entire functions with AI?
And I think I'm not afraid of that happening in legal because, first of all, I've priced my services accordingly. I've already built a practice around being efficient. And if folks can't afford or don't want to pay for that human element, like I could go hire somebody to make furniture for me by hand. What's that going to cost compared to going to whatever, West Elm, and just buying some furniture on the floor, right? It's going to be radically different. It's going to be more expensive. It's more bespoke. But for some industries, like legal, like your estate or your business that you're selling, you might want to reduce your costs by having these service as software come in and do a lot of the grunt work that lawyers don't even like doing anyway. Or like associates, like, it's like hazing to make them do all this grunt work, put them in a room, make them review 1,000 documents by hand, like nobody likes to do that. eDiscovery does a lot of that stuff now. And that was before Gen AI. That was machine learning based AI.
Well,
But now the human can come in, make that connection, earn that value, and explain things in a way they can understand it, and maybe even go on and customize that stuff. So I I welcome the AI replacements of the stuff that no lawyer likes doing anyway, because I've priced my services accordingly.
Right. Now the holy grail is when we replace you completely, right? When I don't need you in the picture anymore. That's truly services software, right? I've taken the whole legal service and said, look, I can do that all in AI. I don't need you. And so let's pick a less complicated business for a second,
Mhm.
and then think about bookkeeping, right? Odds are really good that bookkeeping will go to services software relatively soon.
And I will be an early adopter probably in that space. I spend 5 minutes twice a week now, like just categorizing. And right now AI is already recognized. All my expenses and income is pretty much the same. I'm a small business, so like it only takes me 10 minutes a month to categorize and confirm the AI got it right. Like it is a small step for an AI agent to come in and just do that for me.
Yep. And just take over. And so that's what we think of when we think of services software. Now, let me go to a debate, and I'll say that carefully, right? That Stephen and I had on the last podcast I did with him, which I don't think is published quite yet. So you'll have to wait a week or two. But we were debating the pricing of agents. And the concept here is I have this belief that if we have agents, we're going to have, let's say you create an agent, then I could go create the exact same agent.
Mhm.
So over time, there's no real differentiation. And so we're going to end up driving the prices of using agents down to whatever it costs us to use the agent.
And this is where I think the human element comes back into play, Mark, and why humans aren't going anywhere being involved with agents, where we're working in tandem, because there's something humans can do that can make it more creative or more targeted to a particular market. Just like you wrote instant profits for a particular kind of executive, I think you can customize AI agents, interface. This agent is more pithy, in like the way that it's like responding to you or working with potential customers. Like I really do think that like the artistic, creative side of humans, and frankly on the judgment side, where you still need to exercise judgment, because bookkeeping, the judgment risk is not high. With legal, you might still want a human lawyer to come in and make a judgment on something legal. Not with medicine though, because we've already seen the data on that, and the doctors and AI do it together. The AI gets it right rather than just the doctors or the doctors and AI. But so there are always exceptions. But that's the way I think it's going. Do you agree? Disagree?
So you're down in the co-pilot range.
Mhm.
Totally okay with that, right? If you say, hey, I'm going to use AI to help me be more effective, more efficient, and I'm still going to layer my intelligence, my insight, my creativity on top of that. Now we're in not in the agent, we're in the co-pilot piece, which is totally okay, right? There's nothing wrong with this. The question ends up becoming how valuable is your insight or your creativity? And can you get that from AI and an AI agent? But my argument or my point was simply if you create an agent, I can create the exact same agent.
Right.
And
Right.
so what ends up happening is that we end up driving differentiation and pricing down to costs.
The first agent that I actually want, I've said this on other podcasts and stuff, so I'm just putting it out there. I don't think I've said this to my audience directly yet, is in legal, we have restrictions on how we can market, right? Like we can't do cold outreach. So, just imagine folks on LinkedIn, if lawyers could reach out into your inbox without knowing anything, you'd be receiving a lot more unwanted spam in your LinkedIn DMs. So, thank your local bar associations and state Supreme Courts that we can't do that. So what do we have to do? We have to get an introduction. We have to go to networking events. We have to host seminars, webinars, all kinds of things. And now that's not cold outreach. Now there's a connection there. So what I want is I want an AI agent to review the Excel spreadsheet of the business names, emails, locations of that networking event I was just at, do research on them, like via Perplexity's deep research or GPT search or Gemini deep research with criteria that I've set out, right? And if the first thing for me is they have to be in or having a deal in Illinois, because I'm only licensed in Illinois. If it does that, now you can move on to the next research things, right? So if it gets 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5, schedule a one-on-one with them so I could have like a follow-up, right? So I could like actually try to sell them. Or, if it's like 2 out of 5 or 3 out of 5, humanize. Now I need a review. Do I actually want you to go and schedule this one-on-one follow-up with this potential client, right? And then, but it's doing all that stuff and analysis and everything and decision-making in the background based on the parameters that I've set.
Yep.
Right now, I'd have to hire somebody to do that. I barely have time to do that, right? That's what I would do if I had time to do that. But that's replacing a human job that doesn't exist at my firm because it's just me. But that's a full replacement of an agent. So that's more what you're talking about?
Yeah, and I would say that the one correction I wanted to make, and what you just said, was that it isn't the parameters you set, because it's going to learn what you want. So,
Mm-hmm.
so we as software folks, right? We tend to think of, oh, I got to set these parameters, and if they're in Illinois, then yes, and if they're not in Illinois, then no, and right. But in truth, we say, hey, I'm an Illinois lawyer. I'm only licensed in Illinois. And we start to tell it the things we're looking for. And by the way, I only want to work 30 hours a week, and take a look at my calendar, and right. And so it starts to make these decisions on its own. We don't have to set the parameters, which is what's awesome about AI.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I'd still want to give it some guidelines, if not parameters. Parameters might have been too technical, but
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, look, like if they're employing at least 5 people, generally speaking, like that's a good sign because it means the small business owners in the mindset of outsourcing. And I'm their outsourced legal. So they don't have to do their legal stuff anymore. I'm their fractional GC, right? So like things like that. So like, yes, then the AI agent decides, oh, well, there's only 4 employees. It's close enough, right?
Yep.
Like kind of
Yep.
a thing. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I want to ask you some questions about the book. Let's see here.
Don't feel like you have to, but I'm happy to answer anything.
No, no, no. I want to. So, all right. My first thing on page 21, and this is how it's relevant to lawyers too, because one of the things that you say in here is you talk about monopolies, and you say the obvious unique products are utilities, monopolies, and revolutionary innovations, right? Well, guess what lawyers have? A monopoly on legal services, right? And so, under your definition,
Why do you say that?
no, we do. If you engage in unlicensed practice of law, the bar will come after you, and there's potential criminal penalties and
Okay,
financial penalties.
but let me push back in the following sense.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lawyer in the building next door to you that can sell services just like you can.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Not as an individual business unit, but as an industry,
It's
we
an
have a
industry.
monopoly. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's why the billable hour has stayed around so long, is because there's no other competition and all the lawyers are doing things the same way. So there's no incentive to change the business model. Because
Matthew, do you care if I disagree with you?
no, I hope you do, Mark. That makes things more interesting.
Here's the point. Here's the reason the billable hour sticks around, is because lawyers are scared and stupid. Sorry, all the lawyers can hang up on me now, right? But the whole point here is that the billable hour is the worst way to charge for your time, to charge for your business and what you provide. Absolutely the worst. And yet it's what you've learned. It's what you think is easy. It takes all the risk away. Hey, I'm going to put all the risk on my client. I'm not going to take any risk myself. But but it's horrible, right? It's the worst business model. I think if more and more people started shifting away from that, then what'll end up happening is the people that are paying by the hour will end up losing business to people who are willing to charge by the project or charge by the job.
Yeah.
So I think it's insane. I don't think it has to do with monopoly. I think it has to do with the fact that it's tradition and it's what people know, and not enough people have made the switch yet.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, Mark. And by the way, most people watching this podcast are not in that category of stupid lawyer because they want to stop billing by the hour. They're already interested in that. So you're not offending anyone who's watching or listening. That I could promise you. But I do think it's an and. I don't think it's a either. I think the fact that we don't have competition from other industries that could deliver legal services like they can in the UK, where you have far more fixed fee based lawyers. 85% of practitioners in the UK, according to like 2021 data, are already offering some sort of alternative fee to the billable hour. And part of that is because clients demand it because they're able to get similar or alternative services from non-attorneys providing those services.
And so what's fascinating about what you just said, doesn't that tell you what the market wants?
Oh yeah. That's why I could have a thriving law firm and and a top 10% podcast according to Listen Notes, Mark.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to talk about monopolies.
Well, we could talk about monopolies. That was just my point I wanted to let everybody know about on the podcast. And we already had our conversation on monopolies, Mark, unless you have unless you have more stuff you want to talk about there.
Well, so look, the whole point of that piece of it is buyers sometimes don't consider a competitive alternative.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're looking for is, when is it that my buyer is not saying, oh, I could buy from you or I could buy from this other person over here. That's what we're after. So when we think of a monopoly, I'm thinking, hey, my electric utility, I can only buy from one company. So am I going to buy electricity or not? The answer is yes. And so that's the decision I have to make as a buyer. And electric companies can raise prices and I'm still going to buy electricity. That's what we want to do whenever we think about our marketplaces. Which of our buyers are only making that will I decision? They're not saying, oh, I could buy from you or I could buy from a competitor. And so we're watching closely for that.
Yeah.
And that gives us room to raise prices. When we can identify which people, we don't have to give them discounts. We can charge slightly higher prices.
Yeah. Look, now that when I first had you on, I don't even know if I had been running my own law firm for quite a year yet, maybe around a year. I've got 2 more years under my belt now. And I've had clients who've literally told me, Mark, I think I'm getting more value. I want to pay you more money. And of course I let them. But that is so, like, who does that? Who, like, that doesn't happen very often. And first of all, yes, I am patting myself in the back a little bit with that, but it's also, I'm sure you would say to me, well, you were losing out on all that value that you could have been, getting from your client for who knows how long.
Yeah. So you can pat yourself on the back for how much value you deliver, and I'll chastise you for how low your prices are.
Right. Yeah, no, that's true. That's fair. Like, there are certain times where I think I could probably double my prices and my clients would not bat an eye. But that's also not the point, because every other lawyer is really expensive. And some of my, I'm curious to use the calculator that you reference in this book, because I think I could be more successful in terms of annual revenue if I doubled my prices and lost probably more than half my clients. And
you wouldn't.
I mean, not necessarily. Right. I probably wouldn't, but then eventually I might. And I think there's going to be more competition in this space. And one of the reasons I'm able to, like, the market I'm going after are people who would never pay a lawyer by the hour, and they haven't. Right. And so all of a sudden, like, I will be I don't know if it's doubling, but at some point when I start charging too much, even at a fixed recurring monthly rate, they will maybe start to look elsewhere. And right now they're not even thinking about it, right? So there's something about the value of having them as like a guaranteed customer. Let me tell you about the brand new sponsor for Law Subscribed, Paxton. I've been using Paxton as my legal AI tool for over 2 years. I continue to evaluate and demo other legal AI tools in the market and still decide to stick with Paxton because of its reliability, its accuracy, its ease of use, affordability, and they do not lock you into a long-term contract. Now, as a transactional and fractional general counsel attorney, I'm using Paxton for all of my substantive and non-substantive legal work, whether that's legal research, analysis, drafting, or enhancing existing legal work product. In the time it used to take me to draft and analyze legal documents, now, after a little bit of back and forth with Paxton, I have something ready to go in minutes that used to take hours or even days. While I'm no longer a litigator, I could see how valuable Paxton would be when researching a new issue, preparing for a deposition, drafting a motion, or going to trial. So if your firm would benefit from using Paxton as your legal AI tool, then make sure to use the link in the description when signing up to let Paxton know I sent you. That's all about our new sponsor. Now back to the show.
Okay. Since we're talking about raising prices, which happens to be the whole point of this book.
Yeah.
Let me give you a friendly suggestion. Raise prices on new customers today. Okay, you can do it tomorrow.
Well, I publish my prices though too.
That's okay. Raise prices on new customer. You don't have to charge okay, another point in the book. You don't have to charge every customer the same price. So you could, I'm just going to assume you're charging $100 a month. That doesn't matter to me what it is, right? You're charging $100 a month. And so tomorrow on the website, you change it to $120 a month. All of your current customers aren't even going to look at your website on your prices. Even if they did, they'd be happy they're paying you less, right? And now what you can do is you can start to watch, what's my win rate? Did my win rate go down? Did my conversion rate go down? Oh, look, we're still winning the same number we won before. So that says to me that new customers who don't know how much value you deliver value you at a higher price than your current customers who value you a lot. So once you do that, then you can say, oh, I can start to raise my prices on my current customers because I know I'm delivering value.
All right, I agree. I agree. But we'll
Okay. All right.
moving on from that, because there's actually a lot in the book that I want to cover.
Yeah, let's do it.
Page 28. I couldn't agree with this more, and this is why I don't offer annual subscriptions. It's one of the reasons why. Not there are legal ethics reasons why I don't as well, but this is a business reason that it's true. Monthly agreements force you to build a better business. If your customers can leave at any time, you must continually deliver value to them that keeps you at the top of your game and of your market. So if that's true, and I think it is, why not that be something that any business owner strives for in their relationships?
Oh, I think every business should, right? I absolutely do. I work a lot with private equity firms and companies that buy other companies, and they put huge valuations on annual and multi-year contracts, multi-year agreements. And so that's the pushback I always get is the valuation for the company is higher when they have multi-year agreements.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, it absolutely locks in the revenue, or at least it makes it more likely you're going to get the revenue in the long run. But it hurts the business, I think. Right. I mean, I think the idea that says I have to win this customer month after month after month says to me, I'm truly delivering value to this customer.
And not to, I've friends or people I know, I should say, that I have a good relationship with that work at some of these companies. So nothing against them. But something that Lexis, Nexus, and Westlaw do, which are the big two, it's like an oligopoly for legal research, is they try to lock customers into 2-3 year plans at a minimum. They the shortest term they go is 1 year, but like they try to incentivize you with locking in longer rates to stay low. But then for every customer who might be switching or who might be signing up as a new customer, those rates are still going up every year. So they raise the rates every single year. And I refuse to sign up for them. I when I first got started, I used a 30-day free period at one. I used the 30-day free period at the other. And then I found out and then like AI hit the scene and Gen AI legal research tools started to become available at a monthly rate. Now I'm using Paxton AI. And Paxton gives you a deal if you subscribe for a year, but they let you subscribe monthly, right? Because they're that confident in the power of their product and what it could do for you, right?
Wow.
And I think it's a far better product.
And the other thing about monthly, which I love, is one of the reasons we like subscription businesses is it's easier for our customers to buy our products.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to commit for 7 years. I can commit for a month and see what happens. And so when we go monthly, it makes it easier to win the customer in the first place.
Yeah. From a sales thing, and this might even be earlier in the book, but I have this in my notes here. You talk about how for those bigger sales cycles, you have to it's hard to sell because you have to sell like an executive, like who could like make a decision on something like that. I'm butchering it because I'm not actually reading from the book now. But I thought about what about for like a sales team? Like for example, like I like to use Calendly for scheduling, right? Now, if you're a big enterprise company, you have Microsoft Teams, they have Microsoft Bookings. And so you could use Microsoft Bookings, which I think is a much inferior product to Calendly. And Calendly is not expensive. But somebody in their side hustle or in their personal life, they might be using the free version of Calendly. And maybe Calendly could like target those people as a way to like stealth infiltrate. Cause like having that sales cycle with like at the higher up. So is that a strategy that you've ever seen employed where you try to get the everyday users? And Calendly is just because it's a tool I know, but I'm sure there's other software tools out there. Like get them using it in their personal life so that from bottom up, you could see people wanting to, in the business, use that tool.
Yeah. So the answer is yes. Oh my God. I hate the fact that I can't think of this company's name Slack.
Oh, yeah.
This is exactly Slack, right? So we all have email programs and chat programs and so Slack came along and created a free version that individual users could use. And over time, enough people inside a company started using it that they could start selling company versions of it. And there's huge value there, right? So that's exactly what Slack did. To say, how do I penetrate my large customers one person at a time? Now, this also goes along with a different strategy that we often see in business nowadays. We see it talked about called product-led growth.
Mm-hmm.
And product-led growth simply means, hey, I'm going to give you a free version of my product, and then you're going to upgrade to the next version, and you're going to pay me a little, and then you're going to upgrade to the next version and pay me a little. But this only happens when I know I'm delivering value to my customers.
Right.
Right? Otherwise, they'll never upgrade.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I was a free user of Calendly for years before I started my own businesses, and I became a paying user. And as soon as I could expense it, I was a paying user.
Yep.
Page 33 and 34, number 3.
Okay, I got to say, it always makes me nervous when you make the page numbers, but the
No,
good news, read what I wrote.
yeah, it's all good stuff, Mark. I'm telling you, it's all good stuff. We haven't, like, this is communicating price increases, right? We haven't raised prices in. If it has been at least 2 years since your last price increase, mention this. It softens their response. So I like that. I'm saying this like this is just a teaser for my audience, Mark, because like there's some gold in here, right? You still pay less than, right, the relative pricing difference. You talked about this. If I change my pricing on my website, right, like my existing subscribers will look and be like, oh, like you raised your prices. Yeah, yeah. Well, you've been a long time, client. I'm going to keep your prices exactly where they are, right? The do something nice thing, right? Which I like this, right? It's like, look, we're raising our prices. I just want to let you know, but we're not going to raise yours for X amount of time,
Yep.
right? You still get this. You've been a loyal customer for a long time, right? So there's something related to this though that actually right before we went live, and we were having such a good conversation. I actually have a chance to bring this up. That I read this right before we jumped on. Teen Joe of Zuora just posted. I can't find it now in his newsletter. Here it is. It's called Subscribed Weekly. Is Microsoft's Copilot push the biggest bait and switch in AI? And so what they did, Mark, is nobody was buying their Copilot product. That was an add-on to Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Office or whatever they're calling it these days. And so they just bundled it. And then a few months later, they notified all their customers, we're raising our prices from $6.99 to $9.99, and it all includes AI. And there might be a way to unsubscribe from like those features and go back down to $6.99, but they make it really hard to find and really hard to do. Did they go about that in the right way? How would you advise them that was a better approach?
Okay, so here's the question. And by the way, here's what I struggle with is sometimes I struggle with the ethics of pricing, right? The ethics of what we're doing here. And I would say, given the way that you described it and the way I've seen this, by the way, it seems super unethical.
Mm-hmm.
And but let me tell the story in a way that makes it sound more ethical. And so maybe this is what they did. I don't know. But what if I did the following and I said, look, I'm just going to add AI to my package. And so I add AI to my package. And then over time, I say, hey, it's time to raise prices. Okay, I don't know if I can make this sound ethical no matter what I do. So over time, it's time to raise prices. So I raise my prices. And then I get people saying, hey, yeah, I don't want that. I want the old price. And so maybe they created the package then, but I can't imagine that that's what they did. It just doesn't feel that way to me. And so it feels like what they did was amazingly unethical.
Yeah. And I think it's a great case study because you have Google, and here's how Google did it. Google was also having a hard time getting people to subscribe to an additional product to use their AI features. So they added Gemini, but they didn't add it to every Google Workspace subscriber. They only added it at business standard and up. So if you're just a starter package subscriber at $6 a month, which was the competitive thing to Microsoft, you didn't get the Gemini products and they didn't raise prices. And at least right now, they haven't raised my prices beyond $12 a month. And I have access to all these incredibly powerful AI tools that I wasn't using, with the exception of Notebook LM, because I was using what I thought were much better or at least more accessible AI tools. But now Gemini's bundled. It has a massive context window. I've been playing around with it. I got access to Notebook LM Pro, which is just a better version of the actually only good AI tool Google offers that now I'm fully integrating with my business. So like I'm in now, like I'm a subscriber and I've seen the value. Mark, is Google going to raise my prices like Microsoft did? I'm so worried about it.
So you will end up with a price increase. But one of the things that you read in the book is that when we raise prices, one of the things we do is we talk about, hey, I added this value last year.
Yeah.
And so you will get hit with, but you're going to get hit with a price increase, whether they put in AI or they put in a nicer font, right? It doesn't matter. You are going to get hit with a price increase. But here's a way to think about this, because the problem that you're trying to tackle or that we're trying to talk about is how do I get somebody to adopt a new feature or a new capability?
Mhm.
And part of the problem with AI right now is that there are so many different choices. We don't know what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And so if I were in Google shoes or Microsoft shoes or anybody's shoes and trying to figure this out, what I would have done is I would have said, hey, I'm just going to put it in for free for now, right? You've got a free trial until we turn it off, right? But just know that it's a free trial. You got
Yeah.
6 months, figure it out. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Is it working well? Is it not working well? Do you get value? And then once you do that, you better have a customer success team that's making sure people are using the features, they're using them well, they're getting a ton of value. So 6 months from now, when we say, okay, the free trial's over, it now costs $20 a month or whatever the heck it is.
Yeah.
We're saying, yeah, it's easily worth $20 a month.
So my twist that I want to put on these strategies of communicating price increase, in particular in the context of service-based provider leveraging the subscription model, is I feel like, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on this, I could use these same strategies to try to get clients up the ladder, right? They're at $20 a month and $50 a page. I want to get them up to $2,500 a month, where they get 10 projects, we stop counting pages, right? So I could try to communicate in a similar way. This is like a framework I could adapt to, to basically get them up the ladder. So is that an appropriate use?
Sure, absolutely. Let me give you another strategy that I don't have in the book that you might consider. And I'm just going to simplify it based on what you said, right? But let's say that I'm charging $100 and I want to raise my price to 120, but I also have a better version that I normally sell at 150 and I'm going to raise its price to 175, right? So as I introduce my price increase, I say, look, we're going to do a price increase from 100 to 120. By the way, if you'd like to, we can upgrade you to the better version. Now that costs 150, but we're going to raise its price to 175. We'll hold the 150 price for you if you would like to buy now, right? If you'd like to do the upgrade. And so now what the upgrade difference is only 120 to 150, where it used to be 100 to 150. So it's more likely I can get people to upgrade into my next version up. And so you could do something like that as you're trying to move people up in the product category.
Mhm. That reminded me of some advice I've been giving some lawyers who have been having trouble with this, with pivoting from billable hour to subscription mark. And I am just a pricing person now by osmosis through listening to the Impact Pricing podcast. I didn't study this stuff, but grade me on this. I said you gotta go cold turkey. You gotta stop tracking time, stop billing time. But you don't have to do it right away, and you have to let your clients know. You tell them, okay, in 6 months, we're going to switch to subscription. And it's going to be X amount a month for the same level of, for more level of service than you're currently getting. But if you switch over in the first 3 months, you're going to have a 10% savings on that monthly subscription for a year. Between 3 months and 6 months, it's going to be a 5% savings. And the savings goes down because let them know, look, it's happening whether you like it or not. We're going to stop billing time at this date. You lock in your subscription pricing now. Is that a good thing, a good strategy, bad strategy?
So I like the FOMO, right? I like the one that says, hey, you can lock it in now because over time it's just going to keep going up. We'd love to have you as an early subscriber. Let me talk about the cold turkey thing for a second because that makes me nervous. Can I just I think everybody should be thinking, how do they get away from hourly billing? But when we think about cold turkey, I want to charge my customers the way my customers want to pay. And so if I have customers that really want to pay by the hour, then I don't want them to go to another law firm. Or maybe I do, right? I mean, maybe I want to get rid of them. But if I like them as a customer and that's the way they want to pay, that's the way I want to charge.
So then their billable hour rate will double then. So they could
I'm
still
okay.
pay by the hour if you want, but since we're not doing that anymore, we're still going to let you, because you're a great customer, do it. But we just want to let you know we're doubling our hourly rates.
We're raising the rates to something. I mean, the question is, how badly do we want to lose those customers? And so typically what I would recommend is go start rank ordering your customers and saying, hey, I need these customers to stay. And if I lose these, it's totally okay. So we start raising prices. We start figuring out, okay, if I double the price, how many of them leave? And by the way, if you double the price and less than half leave, you make a lot more money and work a lot less.
Yeah. So some of the communication that I help them with, though, when they're making this cold turkey pitch, which is what I recommend. I don't know if like they don't come back to me necessarily and tell me if it worked or if it didn't, because I think a lot of them get cold feet anyway. But it's communicating that the value of like coming back to the length of this book, but what you're charging for it. We're gonna give you faster turnaround. Everything's going to be faster because now we're not billing by the hour. So we're adopting automations, we're adopting efficiencies. We're going to get you our legal product faster. And that's always more valuable, right? Just like you could read through this book faster, you get your turnaround faster. So like that's part of the communication and why the subscription model is actually, yes, in terms of hours, we're going to be spending fewer hours, but the value that you're getting is going to be so much higher.
Whenever you can communicate the value, that's the whole key is what's the value? And so for me to tell a buyer that you have to buy subscription instead of buy the, I better be able to tell them what's the value of that. And so the value is, hey, I stay on top of your business. I know what's going to happen. I'm going to give you priority when the projects or problems come in. I'm going to do proactive work with you. I'm going to say, how are you doing with this piece? Right. I mean, so there's real value that we have to be able to communicate. That's the key is can we communicate that value?
Yeah. And also since our last talk, I took some of your advice about just instead of just communicating my prices, which is a distinguishing factor, and knowing what your legal fees are going to cost, I think is still a valuable thing because most lawyers can't say that. But now what I tell my clients is I say, get back to what you enjoy in your life and your business. That's what I'm telling them. So now, do you like reading contracts? Do you like having to Google, what does this word mean? Couldn't your time be better spent getting another customer for your business? Yeah. Just for a reasonable monthly rate, you don't never have to worry about a legal thing ever again. And like, that has resonated so much more. And that's, I think, in part because of some of the stuff you told me about. So another thing I want to talk about, and this, I just wrote genius next to this, Mark. This is page 30, page 36, B2B shrinkflation. Oh. This was good. And I don't think I'd heard this. Like, I don't listen to every single podcast episode, but I listen to all the short ones that you post for sure. But I don't think I've heard you say this one before, but I really like this one, right? It's removing those features from your product without charging the price. Then you create a new product with those features added back in at a higher price, but these are features your customers weren't using anyway. And so we talked about this on our pre-show call about how Calendly did something like this, but then they actually passed along some of those cost savings to their customers. So I was paying $150 annually. They took out all these features for teams that solopreneurs like me weren't using anyway, and reduced our price to $120 annually. So of course I changed my subscription. I wasn't using those features anyway. I have to imagine their savings per customer was a lot more than $30 a year per customer.
So let me say maybe, I don't know. Software doesn't cost very much to run.
Right.
So it might have been $30, might have been less, might have been more. But to me, the key is, can you find features and a big segment of people who aren't using those features and just take them out? And once you've done that, you've reset the package essentially, and you're still charging the same price. Or if you lower the price a little bit like Calendly did, that's not the end of the world, but they probably didn't have to. They probably could have just charged the exact same price and said, hey, we raised prices on everything, but we also created a new lower end package, which happens to be exactly what you're using. We'll just hold your price the same.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, I'd probably pay double and not bat an eye at what Calendly's charging me, right?
If Calendly's listening, he didn't really mean that.
The last thing I want to talk about, because we are over time, Mark, and if you got to run, let me know, is page 39, which is really the end. It's like a postscript, really. You talk about thinking about the long-term perspective, right? In fact, the biggest way to drive long-term enterprise value is to focus on customer value while making almost every business decision, right? And so I read that this morning. Teen publishes his blog post, right before we jump on, and he talks about that too, about how the way Adobe's integrating AI and how they're taking the long-term approach, thinking about what's in the best interests of their customers, and how they were an innovator in SaaS, and they took the long-term approach then too, and it's worked out for them really well. In the legal end, I think that's absolutely right. And it's so hard. And the billable hour incentivizes. And my recent LinkedIn Live with Ron Baker, we talked about why you shouldn't use cost accounting, because then you're looking at every little hour billed. Did I make or lose money on that tiny little hour? Versus thinking about the value over a long period, right? Life subscriptions lend itself to this lifetime value. In the legal industry, we've come to call this just being client-centric. In the business industry is this customer-centric. And so I'm also just giving you that, terminology of just being customer centric. Like, how hard is it to be customer centric, right? About all the value you're providing.
Yeah, I work with tons of different companies, and I find it incredible that so few people understand this concept. And it isn't that they don't live it, it's that they don't even understand it. You work with lawyers, and so the phrase I'm about to say doesn't apply as much. But if you sell B2B, then the only reason someone buys from you is because they think they're going to make more money after they bought your product than before they bought your product. And if you can't answer the question, how much more money, you don't understand the value of your product.
And for legal service providers to their clients, it is hard to explain the ROI. It's a hard thing.
It really is. My third book, and I'm not trying to pitch any of my books, right? But my third book is called Selling Value. And it's really all about the concept of how do I communicate value to my customers. And step one, of course, is I have to understand what that is. And when you start thinking about what's the real value to my customers, it has everything to do with what are the problems I'm solving. And so I'll give you huge kudos, Matthew, that you said a few minutes ago, you said, oh, I started communicating this to my customers. And that is, how much do you hate reading contracts, right? So this is a problem. And we're solving that problem for a customer. And I would say, how much are they willing to pay? What I'd really say is, well, how much money do you make them if they don't have to read contracts? They can now take that exact same time and focus it someplace else.
I,
What's that time worth to them?
yeah. And I was on a podcast with somebody where they were interviewing me and they were looking at my prices on my website and they were like $2,500 a month. That's only $30K annually for a business. That's less than minimum wage. So for less, sometimes depending on the right context, I'll say for less than minimum wage of hiring a full-time employee, you'd never have to worry about a legal thing in your business again because you don't have full-time legal needs, but legal things come up all the time. And you as the small business owner have to deal with them.
Yeah.
But what if I told you for less than minimum wage annually? You wouldn't need to, right? And so that's like another way I put that. The ROI thing I found, and it's still hard to quantify, but for deal lawyers, for fractional general counsel, like me, for my clients, not the lawyers, listen to the podcast. If you could turn around red lines faster, that means deals get done faster. That means if your client was going to make money from that deal being fully transacted, they're making that money faster, where every other lawyer takes forever to get the red lines back because, we'll get to it when we get to it and we're going to bill you a bunch of hours for it, right? So not only is it costing my clients not necessarily less, but it's a more predictable price. I'm turning it around faster. Now they start making more money faster. So it's harder to explain. Like I'm still trying to figure out how to explain that and how to certain contracts you might actually be able to quantify. If this took 6 more months to get done, look at how much revenue you've made in 6 months, and I don't always get the revenue numbers, Mark, for my clients after a deal's done. So it's hard to do that. But that's the idea, trying to communicate ROI as a lawyer.
That is the exact idea. And what I try to convince people of is you don't have to walk in and say, here's how much money I'm going to save you.
Yeah.
What you have to do is walk in and ask the questions. And so I'm going to use what you just said for a second.
Okay.
And that is you have to walk in and say, how many contracts a year are we doing? If we could make the contracts happen, or I'm sorry, how long do they typically take today? Oh, they take 2 months to get one done. So we get that back to a month. What does that do for you? Oh, we're going to end up closing more deals. We're going to end up by bringing cash flow in faster, whatever it is. Great. How much more profit do you make when we do that? And so we're just asking them the questions. We're not pitching, here's the answer. And by the way, you want to know what are those problems you're solving. And so you're bringing in contracts more quickly. To go ask about that specific thing. Here's one you didn't mention that probably happens too. And that is how many deals fall apart because it takes too long to close the contract? Right? How many more of those would we have closed? And so now, again, that's pure profit to the customer, right? How much more money are we making you?
Excellent. If there's a clippable part from this podcast episode, that's the clippable part that will be shared. Well, Mark, thank you so much again for coming on Law Subscribed live on LinkedIn. If you're watching this, follow Mark, click the bell, and click all on Mark's profile and mine so that you get notifications about all of our posts. There's so much out there now, like you really want the high quality stuff. And I have Mark's bell clicked and it's all high quality content. And so I highly suggest if you're watching this, you do the same. Mark, if folks wanted to follow up, buy the book, listen to the pod? Where do they do all the things?
Books are on Amazon. You can always email me, mark@impactpricing.com. My website is impactpricing.com, and I am very active on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Make someone's day by sharing this episode with them. The best way to get in touch is to follow and message me on LinkedIn. To get extra content, subscribe to the newsletter at www.lawsubscribe.com, where you can also become a paid subscriber to get episodes and content early. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.